All right, so let's take a look at Module 3.1. And the themes for this model are community of inquiry, specifically just these concepts of presence and interaction, and also active learning. So, first of all, before this class, had anybody encountered any readings? Had you done any readings on community of inquiry or on the concepts of presence and interaction? Is this very new to you, or is this old hat to you? Somewhat new. Okay, great. Anybody else? It's okay if it's new. I mean, that's great. I would hate for you to be bored. New to me. Okay. Anybody else? New or? So the whole point of community of inquiry and a focus on presence and interaction. And this is for the online environment, right? So what was happening was, or is, still is, in the physical classroom with our students, we tend to be interacting with them more. We tend to help them interact with each other more. There's a lot of presence. That is, they're mentally present, they're socially present, and they're present with you. There's a lot of interactions going on between the students, between a student and content, or a group of students and content, and between you and the student. All of these things take place naturally in a face-to-face setting. But as soon as you move online, some of you have mentioned this, it feels cold. It feels like you're all by yourself. There's a bunch of words on the screen, and it doesn't feel real sometimes. And it can be very demoralizing. It can be very frustrating, blah, blah, blah. And so the community of inquiry was looking at how do we, as a group of learners, the teacher and the participants, or the student and the teacher in the classroom, all working together to ensure that when they're online, that they are interacting one with another, social presence, that they are interacting with the content, cognitive presence, and they're interacting with the teacher in terms of feedback and announcements and guidance and instruction, and that's teaching presence. Does that feel pretty straightforward?
Yes.
So it's just about trying to overcome. I mean, it's more than that, but for a beginning foundation of these concepts, it's just about how do we overcome some of the challenges of some of the digital tools, the learning management system, and so on, and also the synchronous tools like Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever. How do we increase the presence and interaction that's normally felt very easily and very naturally in a face-to-face setting? And so there's a lot of research out there on this, and the point is not for you to become specialists in community of inquiry model. The point is for you to just think about your course design in terms of, how do I increase these presences? How do I get the students more socially present, interacting with one another and with you, the teacher? How do I get them to be more cognitively present? One of the big challenges for cognitive presence in an online environment is most people, most people tend to consume online content the same way they consume a television series or a drama, and that is to say very superficially. Then read and they just move on to the next thing, and it's very just low level cognitive presence. So how can we increase that cognitive presence in our digital materials, in our activities with the students, and so on? And then teaching presence is not just about how you are interacting with the students, but students can also be a part of the teaching presence when they are doing peer reviews, when they're doing group work and helping each other, all of the things that help the whole group or individuals within the group learn more and be guided in their learning. This is all part of teaching presence. And then I've just included here, and these are in the readings in more detail, but the STAR Talk criteria and the ACTFL criteria that are related to this concept of presence. So for teaching presence, the instruction and assessment criteria in ACTFL and the instructional design and delivery criteria in STAR Talk, those are related to this concept of teaching presence. All right, I'm going to stop there. What kind of questions, thoughts, concerns, ideas? Yes, Nadine.
So I'm trying to find examples. At the beginning of the class, I always invite the students if they would like to be quote unquote a co-facilitator with me.
Mhm.
And the co-facilitator means that not that they have to do a lot, but in case if I miss a hand raise, if there's something in the chat, and sometimes if I have like a slide up that is like, let's say, describing a grammatical point, I ask that particular student to read it out loud instead of me before me like explaining it. And I usually give extra credit for that. And throughout the semester, I open this opportunity to everyone. So pretty much everybody get that 1 point extra credit. I was just thinking, is that a COI example?
It is, yes, yes. It's a example of sharing teaching presence among the group. This is always effective. I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, I don't remember it. You know what? And I think was first uttered by a Chinese philosopher about I read and I forget, but I teach and I remember. I forget the long thing, but if you have your students helping you with the teaching, it really improves not only is it active learning in that case, but it's also improving teaching presence. And it's particularly effective with younger kids because they like being in adult positions. It's part of their developmental profile. So there are other examples in the classroom. So if you, in resources, there are strategies for improving presence. So there are some general ideas for how to improve social presence in an online asynchronous environment, how to improve social presence in a synchronous environment, and so on. And then if you go to cognitive presence, these things will change. So you can get some ideas, some examples of those different types of presence and what they look like in the different modalities. Okay, so that's strategies. Any other questions about that?
Yes, may I have a question, please,
Yes.
Bethany?
Yes.
Yeah. So I just take example. I don't know if these examples can be called as a teaching presence or cognitive presence, or maybe combined with the cognitive and the teaching presence. And the recent years, every time when I give the assignment for my students, for the I mean when it comes to the end of the sessions or semesters, I always give the assignments like ask them to be a teacher. Now the role is a change from the students to teacher. I
Mhm.
said now it's time for you to take a responsibility to be a teacher. And why I do that, because I think now is already at end of the semesters. They already know a lot, right? Now it's time for them to use what they have learned into the practice. And as far as I know, there's a very famous thing. No, there's some research. I think is American research. Some American scholars, make a very good research. As they said, the best to how to say the best to keep the information or keep what you have learned in the mind is not just remembering or just recording. The best one is do do that, to teach somebody, right? To teach, to give a teaching to somebody. Just to use what you have learned, in the past to teach somebody. So this is the best way to keep all what you have learned in the mind. And in this way, as they research, they can keep at least 90% of the content, right, in the mind for a long time. And so when I get this information, I make adjustment. And especially recent 3 or 4 years, every times when it comes to the end of the semesters, I give this kind of the assignment to my students, right? And so I don't know, this kind of assignments can be called as cognitive or teaching present.
No, it's a great example of teaching presence. It's also a great example of, again, active learning. So yeah, anytime you involve the students with you in helping others, then that is a part of teaching presence. If you think of all the things that you normally do as a teacher, you instruct, you create materials for the students to look at, you do lecturing, you do discussions and feedback. All of these things are teaching presence, right? Also things like setting the climate. You, by your policies that you put in place, by the way that you insist that students interact with each other, the type of materials that you choose to include, all of this sets the climate, sets the tone of the classroom. And so any of those things that you would normally do, if you involve your students in them and you encourage them to help you do those things, then that's all a part of teaching presence.
And actually, I just give some instruction, right, and give just a brief instructions and some directions to this kind of the final project. And the rest of things have to be done by themselves. And of course, they didn't do individually. They have to do the group discussion, the group project, this kind of the group project, because it's too much big workload for them if they do it individually. Yeah. And but I think it's beneficial for the students. And some students tell me, they said, maybe some things still keep in mind, but this kind of the final project can keep in the mind at least for much longer time. determine this
Definitely.
way. Yeah.
Yes. A much
Mhm.
deeper learning. Much deeper learning.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? These are just picking out a few of the strategies that are in the readings in Module 3.1 in the resources. All right, let's talk about active learning a little bit. In the physical classroom, often one of the things that you do with your students is you ask questions. So you might provide some direct instruction in one way, shape, or form. Maybe you let them watch a video or read the lyrics to a song or something in the target language. And then you ask questions to them. And you're basically asking them to work with that information you just gave them, do something with it, answer a question, explain something, and so on. This is inherently active. When we move into an online environment, for some reason, people shift to a read only or lecture only kind of mode, and all of that Q&A kind of falls by the wayside. A lot of the active learning strategies that we engage in a physical classroom seem to get lost when we move to an online environment. And so when you're designing your lessons, not only are you thinking about what sort of activities will I include to increase social presence, to increase cognitive presence, to increase teaching presence? What sort of things am I going to do? But also, what am I going to do to help my students avoid intellectual passivity? Okay, this happens a lot. Anytime a student moves online, and they start reading, actually it happens face to face too. I'm sure you've seen students read textbooks or read books of any sort, and they don't stop and they don't reflect and they don't ask themselves questions and they don't ask themselves, how does this connect to something I already know, et cetera, et cetera. But it happens more often in an online environment. So when we are designing learning activities, when we're designing our content and our assignments, we need to think about, how do I get these learners to engage more cognitively? So this is part of cognitive presence, cognitively with the content. How do I get them to ask questions and stop just reading things? Just like in 2 minutes later, they have no idea what they read, or listening to a video. This happens a lot, especially because of everybody's way that they consume television media, for example, and social media posts. It's just so superficial. So we have to build in strategies to avoid this. So the ways that we do this are, we have activities where we encourage them to organize their information, that the new information that they're getting. Concept maps is an example of this. And how do we get them to make connections between the new information that they know and the information they previously learned? How do we get them to recall information and practice more? Now, a lot of times we will give worksheets and we'll ask students to practice quite a bit. We'll be like, close sentences, like fill in the blanks, or conjugate this verb, or whatever practice activities you're doing. But before that, they should be organizing that information. Like, how does this fit in with what I already know? And recalling it. Yeah, so I'm going to stop there. Active learning, your thoughts on this? Have you consciously thought about active learning in your classes, even if you didn't call it that? Thoughts?
Yeah, good morning.
I think.
So I really like this concept, active learning. We always said active listening, but active learning, very important. Yeah. I remember one time when we tried to teaching the students, since we are kind of Saturday school only, so, the exposure to them, to the culture and the language, really just 1 day per week, depends on, whether they join the Chinese immersion, they are homeschool or not. But for them to get familiar with the teaching material, before the class begins, to engage this active learning, it's just very important to improve the effectiveness, right? So one time we tried to teaching some, Chinese, favorite food, or, the normal, the dish names, so we just kind of asked them to do some presentation with the photos. They had to make their own favorite food under the guidance with their parents, take the photos, the results, and, they are kind of holding their dish. And also before, in progress, and also after the photos, just proud to present, to say, hey, they made it. So then once we introduce, all those, the typical, the popular dish, so they kind of learn very quickly, because they already kind of have some hands-on experience, in home. Yeah. So that's, I think it's very good. They had to become like a decision maker instead of just sit there, accept, oh, we kind of old school approach, like a lecture, right? They certainly can do lots of great things if they are curious, they want to learn more. Yeah, that's just very important. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
No, thank you. It's a great example. It really, something that a lot of language learners do that I'm sure that you've probably noticed when you're teaching is maybe you introduce a new set of vocabulary, or you introduce a new grammatical concept within the context of a project or a task or something. And maybe they read about it, and then maybe they do some practice sheets or something. But then it seems like next week you mention a word that was on that list, or the grammar concept that you previously discussed, and you see these blank looks on their faces. Like, what? You told us about this? What? A really easy and extremely effective, very effective in terms of improving grades, and more importantly, improving understanding, because in the long run, who cares about grades? It's about understanding, right? So you can call it a number of different things, the 1-minute paper, the data dump, the whatever. But after you give a brief lecture on something and you ask them to actively listen and take notes, then just asking the students to take 5 minutes, or 1 minute, don't look at their notes, and just write down every single thing that they remember that you just were lecturing them on, or that you were instructing them on. If they do that, if they just do this one active learning strategy after every little mini lecture, after every little video content that you have provided for them, and you say, great, now just stop, don't look at your notes, write down everything you remember. That one little strategy will significantly improve their outcomes, because they are immediately like pulling that information out. And then if you do that the next day and you say, stop, Don't look at your notes. Tell me what you remember from yesterday. Tell me what you remember from the day before.
Bethany,
Yes.
yeah, this is a great activity, but you know, I just want to comment on the part of tell me. So it's not always easy. If you ask me, tell me, well, in writing, yes, but if you actually physically ask Orly to tell, that's not everybody's going to volunteer that, and that's very intimidating.
Right. Yes. So, under that's very true. And a
But
lot
we're
of,
talking about writing, right? So that I agree. Yeah, it's a good activity.
yeah, you can do it via voice, but as you pointed out, some students will feel less comfortable with that, in part because they're fearful of making mistakes. And I would argue that that's the number one strategy we should do with our students at the very beginning, is get them over that hurdle of making mistakes. Like, if they can be comfortable, especially with language learning, they can be comfortable, like, quote unquote, sounding silly, then they're going to improve so much more quickly. But I was definitely talking about writing in this case. Like, in the physical classroom, you could hand out 3x5 cards, index cards, to your students and say, here's a card. And that decreases the intimidation, because a full sheet of paper, it's like, oh my gosh, I got to write so much. But a 3x5 index card, write down everything that you remember. Then they could turn them in. You could do a quick feedback on those. And by the way, since you all have to take attendance and all that sort of stuff, it's a great way to do attendance too. Do that right at the beginning of class for yesterday's materials. Like, what do you remember from yesterday? Anyway, some other strategies for doing active learning. We have concept mapping. Always fun. Concept maps are one of those high impact teaching strategies that you can use. So there are like, there's books of hundreds of teaching strategies that you can use. And they've all been researched, and some of them are much more effective than others. Concept mapping is one of those super effective, just like that data dumping we just talked about. Super effective strategies for improving understanding and long-term retention of the information. So you could do concept mapping. Of course, flashcards is very useful for stimulating recall. Asking for comparisons is very, very active learning, like wrestling with that content and trying to figure out, where are they similar, where are they different. This is super, super effective learning activity. And then teaching them how to be active listeners and how to be active note takers, especially in the language, in the target language, as much as possible. Like, every time they're taking notes, if they run across a word that they've already learned before, and they write that down in the target language rather than English, or rather than, what their native language is. These are things that you can do for active learning. And then all these task-based learning and teaching, project-based learning, all of these sorts of things that get the students to use the information to accomplish something real world. And this is in contrast to taking a test. Test is not real world. Anything not a test would be real world. How to cook a dish, how to give a presentation, any of those things. Any other thoughts or questions on active learning? Or, because these are the kind of the foundation, think of these as some of the foundation items that you're going to be thinking about when you're doing your lesson plans, right? So your lesson plan shouldn't be, students will read chapter 1 and then take a quiz. That's not active learning. It's not cognitive engagement or cognitive presence. It's not social presence. It's not any of those things. So how are you going to flesh out those learning units, those lesson units that you're working on, so that they encourage active learning and so that they encourage cognitive presence and social presence? Yes, Victoria, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just, yeah, I don't know. I wanted to share a strategy that I use all the time. I'm
Wonderful.
not sure, I'm not big on buzzwords, as I mentioned, you know, what categorizing what I do into uh, concepts, but can I share my screen?
Yeah, hold on one second. Let me give you I'm going to stop sharing and then I'm going to give you
Yeah, I think I could do it. So, and I do that a lot. So for example, anything you do in class or at home, you know, oh, sorry. I prepare like a table and could have any number of categories, and then you give an assignment where it's a shared file. We have a shared file with for every class that I teach, and everybody has access from the beginning. And so what this one says, it's basically, this one is vocabulary, but there are different other concepts that let's say, oh yeah, this is a song that they listened and looked at the words. And so these are 4 categories. Oh no, that's not a song. That's actually a novel, a classic novel by Chekhov.
Oh, okay,
And
wonderful.
this is 4 categories that they read. Let's say they read a short story, and then so they're called to scan a certain part of it and um, copy out the words. And so those are 4 categories of words. That this is like positive words of the main character. This is a words connected to winter, a words connected to or expressing feelings of the main character. And these are the words that contrast. So basically, all students are invited at the same time to go and fill out that table at the same time. And because it's, when it's not mechanical, it's actually pretty creative, you know, and it's a lot
Yes.
of scanning. And nobody's monitored, like we don't really know who does what. So there's no intimidation factor in that. And then basically those are very fast students, and you give whatever 5 or 6 minutes, and then you review the table. And so that's one example, but that's as an activity, it's super effective. I'm looking at something else that you could do. Well, whatever, you know, it doesn't matter, but I've used it a lot as a quick process of active learning and active processing of information and sharing and looking at it and quick work.
That's a wonderful example. Thank you so much. I love it. I love it. That's a great comparisons and classification active learning strategy. Thank you. Thank you.
Right, and I'm just saying I call everybody to try it. It's very, very, very effective and could function on different levels, on all levels, you know. It depends on the assignment. The assignment you give, you know, students could be of difficult levels of different levels of difficulties, and everybody's engaged, and there's like a little competition. Everybody's typing. They need to know how to type. Like not all my students know how to type in a language.
That's great. So it serves a lot of purposes. Love it. I love it.
Yeah.
If I am remembering correctly, Li Feng, is it you that is doing the Tang Dynasty poetry class? Am I remembering correctly?
Yes.
I thought of you immediately when I saw Victoria's example. Does that seem like something that would be something that you've done or would do in your class that could be useful to helping them do like close reading of the poetry?
Yes, we try. Yeah, I had teach like lessons for twice for different students. After normally in the 8th grade, I saw your commendations is normally in 8th grade, because in China, in Asian China, students learn language start for the poetry. Yeah, they through the reading, the poetry to make the sense of the language. So for here, not to start from poetry, but I think it's very interesting because there are a lot of the beautiful poetry in there. So and the final, after we introduce some famous poeters and teach them regular the very simple rules of the make poetry, but the final, the student can try to make them own. So very interesting, but not real like the real Asian Chinese poetry, but look like say 7 words, 4 lines, something related to their life. So it's very interesting thing, I think.
Love it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love it. I have, just as an aside, I have several books of Chinese poetry. I've got most of it focused on the Tang Dynasty. I know that was kind of like the flourishing golden period of with Wu Wei and Du Fu and Li Bai and others.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
Thank you.
All right. So we're at the point where we're going to take a little bit of a break, right? We've been here 50 some odd minutes. We'll take a 10-minute break, stretch, get something to drink, do whatever you need to do. We'll resume back here at 5 minutes after the hour. Okay. I'm going to pause the recording so we don't have a big blank spot. I will hang out here in case somebody has a question, but just take a break, even if you just stand up, stretch, do whatever, so that our brains don't get muddled. Okay, is everybody good with that? 10-minute break. Awesome. All right. I'm pausing the recording. All right, so I resumed recording. So final project and group work. Now I was gonna have us break into groups of 4 for a little brainstorming, but as there's only 6 total of us, we could do this at our small groups, or we could break out in pairs. We could stay as a whole group like we are, or we could break out in pairs. Do you have a preference for brainstorming? Okay. Let's do it together then. This week is about design, right? So you may have noticed in the template that week 3 is this backward design where you start with the world readiness standards, then you think about your theme and essential question, your instructional goals, and so on and so forth. Now we're going to delve more into that starting tomorrow, where we're going to look specifically at what are some world readiness standards that you are going to be addressing in your lesson unit, and what is your theme or your essential question, what are your instructional goals, and then we'll break it down even further into performance assessment and so on. But before then, I just wanted to warm us up today by brainstorming some possible active learning strategies Victoria already shared a great one with us. For example, several of you have shared some active learning strategies, but let's brainstorm some of those and that might fit with your lesson unit that you're thinking about creating or designing. Okay. So for example, mine is on hobbies, a fairly typical for any language learning class, hobbies and pastimes. So suggest to me an active learning strategy or a way to increase cognitive, social, or teaching presence in this unit on hobbies and pastimes. Anybody? And it could be any language, of course. It doesn't have to be Chinese.
Can you repeat the question?
We are brainstorming active learning strategies. Brainstorming active learning strategies. And strategies that can be used to increase presence, cognitive presence, social presence, teaching presence in our lesson units. I'm using mine as a starting point so that nobody feels picked upon. My lesson unit is on hobbies and pastimes. What are some active learning, some activities that encourage active learning or encourage presence that I might be able to use for this unit on hobbies and pastimes?
So Bethany, I'm thinking for your project, since you're talking about hobbies stuff. So I look at the strategies. There is, how to do an active community of inquiry, COL. So one thing is about cognitive presence. So I'm wondering, maybe you can do something like a show and tell. So if a hobby, for example, somebody's hobby is basketball, maybe he can hold a basketball and show that, or tennis. So it's more like you not only speak, but also you have other cognitive existence, like touch, the shape, the view, the appearance. So by doing that, you bring the student in the class with more attention and participation. So that's something I just thought of.
That's great. I've got it down. I'm guessing you're a total physical response kind of teacher.
Thank you.
No, it's a great method. It's one of the top 5 TPR, total physical response. It's a way of teaching languages by focusing on your other senses, like movement and touch and taste and so on and so forth, to really set those concepts in the brain. The more you can connect it to your physical self, the theory goes, the more you're likely to remember it. So I love it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so there, we picked on me. Now, who wants to get an idea from somebody? Who wants to talk about their lesson? Okay, Nagin, do you want to go ahead? Tell us about this.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just giving you an idea about interaction about hobby. I'm sorry. It was
No,
just
no,
on
that's-
your lesson that something that I do usually is that I pair up the students and I tell them that, hey, let's say like, for instance, the example that was given about like basketball, like without saying that it is basketball, your hobby, but other words or explanation you can give the other party to guess, and were they able to guess? And so they love it. They just love it. So, and that's an icebreaker mainly, and then we dive into the yeah, to the discussion. So just an idea.
no, how fun. That reminds me of that game Taboo. Are you all familiar with the game Taboo, which is a great game for language learning?
Yes. Yes, exactly. That's where I got the idea. Yes.
I love it. I love it. If y'all are not familiar with Taboo, Taboo is a game where you have to you have to describe something so that a person can tell you what it is you're describing, but there are a list of words that you absolutely can't use as part of your description. So for example, if you're trying to get them to say the word France, you might not be able to use the word Eiffel Tower or baguette or, stuff that you would kind of typically associate on a very superficial level with France, right? Anyway, fun game. Really great vocabulary and active kind of learning game. And grammar too, if you make them like speak in complete sentences. Love it. Okay. Now who wants to get some ideas from the group? Who would like to share their lesson idea, theme, or topic and get some suggestions? Or you can keep picking on me. It's okay.
I have, just to continue the activity that I offered, or the format, not an activity, but like if you want to start the topic of hobbies, again, you could I can't. All right, I can't. Again, you can present a shared file as a table where it has, for example, 4 columns. One would be my hobby, a second one, you post a picture of your hobby, then you could describe what you do. And then, and a fourth one, just as an example, you can describe what do you aspire to do. So that could be done right away without any preparation, and also, be pretty fun. And of course, that there are presentations that you could do a show and tell, or you can do a video of what you do, what you have done, or what you want to do. You can do a video of other people.
Love it. I love it. And that one also has the benefit of being able to be done in a physical classroom using digital enhancements, or in an online asynchronous or synchronous classroom. So that's nice. Thank you. I've written that down as well.
You can also, they're just thinking on the spot. I mean, and you can also, again, do a shared file and just put yourself, you put different types of hobbies and ask students to brainstorm any of the categories, what you do in these hobbies. Again, post a picture, which is, pretty active. Things like that. Not necessarily what they do, but in general, introducing what could be a hobby, what are different hobbies, what is the vocabulary related to hobbies.
Great. That reminds me, I was just watching a video on task-based methods. I might have shared it in the water cooler forum, but they had the kiddos learning a card game, and all of the conversation while they were trying to learn this card game and had to be in the target language as much as possible. They were also using English, but the task was to learn the game and talk about the game and play the game in the target language, and games of any sort are hobbies or pastimes. So I thought that was kind of cool and fun. Now this was taking place in the classroom, but you could do digital versions as well. I think a lot of times we have a tendency to forget that a lot of learning happens while we're having fun, or rather than listening to a lecture or so on. So I know, for example, Victoria likes to use a lot of learning of songs and practicing songs and doing things like that that hook into a lot of kids' interest. Anyway, my point being, fun activities are active learning. The fun component kind of adds another level of learning potential to the activity. We do that more with the younger kids, but as we get older, I think we tend to forget that it still works, that having fun and learning something, and this concept of like getting into a flow while you're trying to learn something, really reduces anxiety and lets us learn more easily. Any other ideas, questions? Active learning or increasing presence. All right. I will recommend to you, as you are trying to brainstorm possible ideas for your own class, that you go to something like ChatGPT or Copilot. All right. Copilot might be more engaging for you because it's a lot more going on, and just say something like, I am teaching a unit on whatever to whatever level and age group, and I want to use some active learning strategies. Please provide examples. Okay? As simple as that. And it's going to spit out some ideas for you that you, as the expert, can then just say, oh, that sounds interesting. Or, oh, that has possibility, but I need to modify it. Or, oh, God, that's a horrible idea. But you're the expert. You decide. But use AI, get some ideas. I encourage this. This is not cheating in this class, okay? Using AI to help you is perfectly acceptable. Any other questions, thoughts, ideas, anything? All right. I just want to point out one last thing then, while you're processing all this, all the things that we've been talking about. In the module 3.1 activities, there is a survey. Please fill that out today. It's very simple. We want you to continue working together with 1 or 2 other people, or even 3 other people. But this survey will help you figure out who will be a great fit to include in your working group. All right. And so the questions are about how you would like to work together synchronously or asynchronously to work on your lesson units, right? So that you're not alone. I mean, you can reach out to me and ask me questions, but it would be great to work with somebody. So how you'd like to work together, what your availabilities are. Notice, use Eastern time zone for this, okay? So if you say evening Eastern time zone and you happen to be in Shanghai, and that's actually in the morning your time, but just say evening. Okay. So when you're available and how committed you are to like, oh, I'm really excited to be doing this lesson unit and I want to work 5 hours a week on this. Or yeah, no, I've got so many other commitments. I only want to work 1 to 3 hours. This way you don't get partnered up with somebody whose availability and or commitment levels are not the same as yours. And then where you feel comfortable. Now, we asked you this back in week 1 to help you start getting an idea of your different skills so that you could each have an idea of your different skills. But, you know, put down what you're comfortable with. And the general idea is find somebody who's available and wants to work at the same commitment level as you and who balances you out by bringing something to your group that you don't bring. Right? So if you're really great at backward design and suck at technology use, then you might want to pick somebody that's better at technology use, as an example. Right. And then there are several people in this group who there are no other teachers of the same language, right? So Nagin teaches Farsi, teaches Persian. Nagin, just as a quick note, what is more accurate to say, Persian or Farsi?
I'm sorry, I use them interchangeably, but thank you for mentioning that. It's more accurately to say Persian.
Great. So, for example, Nagin has nobody else in the group that does her language, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. You could work with somebody, for example, if you were interested in scripts and dealing with issues of scripts, maybe working with an Arabic teacher would be useful, but maybe working with somebody that does Korean would give you a whole new set of ideas. So, as far as the next cohort, we have no idea about if there's going to be another cohort or anything like that. So I don't know. Anyways, yep. So go ahead and fill that out and get started. Like, once everybody fills this out, then you'll be able to see other people's responses so that you can start making connections and reach out to somebody. You can use the class list and to message somebody and say, hey, maybe it'd be cool if we work together and bounce some ideas off each other. Okay? Is everybody cool with that? Wonderful. All right. I know we went a few minutes over, but thank you very much for everything today. I will see you in the classroom. And remember, if you have any questions or you want to schedule some time, one-on-one time with me, just send me an email and we'll schedule a time that works for us. All right. So take care. Have a wonderful day. I will hang out in case you have a question that you want to get answered before you leave.